Well, at the start of the 20th century, Tsarist Russia was an autocracy. That's to say it was ruled by one man on a principle that essentially treated this vast, backward, multinational empire as though it were his personal estate. Now that had changed before the war. In fact, about 12 years before the revolution broke out, Russia was engulfed in a revolution which involved practically every sector of society, not just the middle classes or the revolutionary intelligentsia or students, all the usual suspects, but also peasants, mutinying sailors. So the Tsar, in fact, was very nearly toppled, and he was certainly forced to make concessions in 1905, and he promised to become a constitutional monarch, but in fact failed really to honour that commitment. And the result of that was that really by about 1910, in fact really earlier, Russia was already deeply divided not only by the strains of modernization, which made a great gulf between the wealthy and the new industrial classes, industrial workers and middle classes, but just general strains of modernization. This was a society changing very rapidly. Although it was agrarian overwhelmingly, and most people were peasants, Russia was industrializing rapidly. It was the fifth largest industrial power in the world by 1914, but it was also the most strike-prone. So there we see radicalism already. It was a deeply divided society. Therefore, although the Tsar had, in theory, enormous power, he didn't actually have enormous authority. He hadn't honoured his promises, democratic promises, to deliver a kind of democratic liberal regime, and that alienated the educated classes, the middle classes, who would normally have been the backbone of the political regime, as they were, for example, in France or Britain at the time. So the empire, or Tsarism, Tsarist Russia, blundered into war in 1914, strangely against the advice of the very conservative interior minister, who advised the Tsar against going to war because he said, the peasants want land, the workers want to own the factories, the revolutionaries want revolution, and we have really very few people behind us. Go into war and you risk being swept away. A strange prophecy from a very conservative minister in 1914. And broadly speaking, that's what came to pass. The war was prosecuted incompetently. The Tsarist Russia, the authorities weren't able to manage it properly. 14 million men approximately were mobilized. And it was a bit of a disaster for Russia. They had enormous losses. Between those who actually died, were lost without trace, according to some statistics, Russia lost more men than any other power. Germany had more men killed, but Russia had more men, if you like, unaccounted for. And so you have something like an overall death toll of around 8 million. So by the beginning of 1917, the cities are suffering from acute shortages of fuel, more importantly of bread. The factories are working under grotesquely discipline, is really very draconian discipline in the factories. The workers are discontent. There have been more price rises. Things had come to such a pass that not only were the upper classes, the middle classes, worried about the Tsar's capacity to conduct the war competently. So even members of the royal family, the imperial family, were even talking about the need perhaps to replace the Tsar. And the generals were very ready to go along with that suggestion when it was made a couple of months into the new year of 1917.